Welcome to Arena Radio, the battlefield of ideas. My name is Chris Pilier with lanternsofliberty.us and the battlefieldofideas.com. I want to thank you for joining me today. We're going to have a little discussion here about immigration, specifically, and a little more generally about the importance of borders. And in order to discuss borders, we need to obviously define borders. And once we define borders, we need to understand the relevance of borders generally. Because borders are more than just what is around the United States or around states in general, or around other nations. They have a more broader meaning. So what I'm going to do here, we're just going to look up a very simple definition of a border and understand or just discuss briefly what the word means. So a border is a line separating two political or geographical areas, especially countries. And I want to focus on political because the idea of politics, it goes further beyond political parties or anything like that. Political parties are more or less a collective of people that think in like manner. So politics, just generally, is how society operates. So when we talk about a line separating two political or geographical areas, you know, we could obviously say there's a border between Republican and Democrat, or conservative and liberal, you know, left and right. And of course, you know, it gets a little blurry when you try to define those items, but more or less people either subscribe to a certain ideology. You know, they might be libertarian. There's borders around libertarianism. And we can actually understand or look at us as individuals as having boundaries. We often say that you're invading my space. Well, when you're invading someone's space, you've crossed their border, right? So an idea of a border is something that surrounds and protects something, or is something that defines something. You know, if it's a geographical border, it'll actually show you the shape of a particular nation or a state or a country. So borders do hold a relevant importance because of the fact that they define things. So when you tear down borders, you distort or remove the defining principles of a particular item or geographic area or political party or political ideology. And I would say that there is a case to be made for some things of, you know, breaking some of those borders. But when you start to break some of the borders, you're blurring the You're making something blurry because you can't define it. You see my shape in this image right here that you're looking at on the screen. The borders of my body define me. So when we talk about the border on the south of the United States, and we talk about its porous attributes right now, and things are coming in and people are coming in and out, and things like drugs and guns are coming in and out of our borders. The more porous our border is, the less defined we are as a nation. So the border not only is a line in the sand or a boundary, but there's more to it than that. So let's look at the United States and how we are different from a lot of other countries in the world. Well, we are a united a union of states or a United States. So we have individual states that have borders within the country that has borders. Within the individual states, they have counties or parishes, like in Louisiana. And those parishes or counties have borders. We have cities that have borders. And within those counties, parishes, or cities, there is communities. You know, I live in a neighborhood that is a community. We have specific rules for our community. And those rules only go as far as our boundaries or our border. And we can even go further than community. In community, you can look at as a church, like parishes in Louisiana was actually built around the Catholic Church. So the church has boundaries. And you can go further than that. I am married and have a child. We have a border that makes up our family. So when you destroy the border of a family, you destroy the border, or destroy the family, I'm sorry. And it even goes further than that. Individuals have borders, like I mentioned earlier. So what am I getting at? Well, in order to destroy an individual, you have to destroy their rights. And their rights are protected by their border. They're protected by their boundary of the individual. My rights are within me. I own them. Or if you're religious in nature or faithful in nature, they were gifted to me or loaned to me by God. So when you tear down my borders as an individual, you're undefining me, if that's a word. You're blurring my individuality. So there's a reason why the Constitution, along with the Bill of Rights, specifically tells the government what it can't do to the individual, because the individual is the building block of our nation. So people that do not like the individual nature of our country, they have to tear down that border. Now keep in mind that when our country was designed, I think Thomas Jefferson actually talks about the nature of our communities and how our communities are, you know, communal areas where people collect and discuss and share things, make commerce, create rules and laws in order to maintain civility inside of those communities. Churches have their own rules. Some of those rules are based on a doctrine, Catholic doctrine, a Protestant doctrine. So the individual, being the minutest level of sovereignty, you have a family. Now we all know that individuals are imperfect, and we all have our problems, and we need each other. So we first go to our family members in order to get help. And in that family, there's borders around that family. And when we can't get help from the family, we go to our community. We may go to our church. And in some cases, the community may not be able to provide what we need. And we go to our state. And then if our state doesn't have the ability to do what we need it to do, we go to the federal government, which is the last resort. So when the founders designed our country, they designed it in a manner that the federal government was the least powerful. that the individual was the most powerful. So when our communities, we set up our communities to more or less represent us with different laws and attributes, protections. Some communities actually have a minor, very small welfare type system, which I'm all for. Communities making up their own systems. I mean, that's the idea of it. If I'm living in a community and I don't like the way that the borders around my community and the people within those borders are representing me, I can move to another community, one that more represents me as an individual or my family. So communities and states were intended to be experimental ground or areas for liberty or protecting liberty. You know, kind of like what Colorado's doing with legalizing marijuana. That may be the best thing that they ever did in that state. It may be the worst thing that they ever did in that state, but it's not going to affect other states that don't participate in that. There will be some issues where you have people in Colorado going to buy weed and driving out of the state, but there's borders around that state, and outside of those borders, you're no longer protected under that law to smoke marijuana or sell marijuana. So why is this important? Well, like I said, borders define us. So borders are extremely important, especially for a nation. Now, culturally, borders are very important because they protect our culture. Americans have a specific culture. We are Americans. People that try to divide us are against America. People that try to balkanize people in groups like blacks and whites and Hispanics, which is a made-up term by Nixon and his people. The Chinese, the Japanese, Mexicans. Dividing us is breaking our borders. Balkanizing us is tearing down our cultural borders. You hear about multiculturalism. The idea of multiculturalism is destroying our borders. It tears away the idea that we're American. So if you're to destroy the United States of America, you have to destroy our borders, all of our borders. What makes America different from El Salvador? What makes America different than China? What makes America different than Uzbekistan or Afghanistan or France? It is our culture. It is our system. So if we don't wish to be any different, then we tear down our borders. There's no other government or a system of government in the world that protects our borders the way the United States does. And understand when I'm saying borders, I'm not just talking about the outlying geographical markers around our country that make our nation what it is. I'm talking about all of our borders. So when we talk about the importance of borders, that is what protects us. Our borders protect us. And they protect us because the law utilizes borders in order to determine how far those laws reach. So when you read the Bill of Rights are specifically protections up to our individual borders. Okay, so enough of the esoteric stuff. Let's get into the meat of the issue that we all been discussing, and it has to do with our southern border. And in order for us to really take and get a good perspective of what we need to do on the border, we have to understand the threats. And so I always see liberals that say, well, conservatives are always complaining about things, they never have solutions. They're not sensitive and compassionate to people coming into our country that are coming from horrible places. And they don't have solutions. Well, sometimes you don't have solutions. We already have the solution. The protection of our borders is a solution. It just doesn't happen to be a new solution or a revolutionary solution or a solution that's going to change or fundamentally change the country. The idea of always trying to have some kind of solution is a progressive term or a progressive idea. So when conservatives don't always have solutions, that's because we're conservatives. The solution already exists. Why do you want to change it? If the shoe fits, wear it. So how do you fundamentally transform a country? Well, you change its borders or make its borders porous. You allow a culture that is not assimilated to American culture to take precedent in the United States and get more rights than the people under the American system, because they are getting more rights than you are. They come here and they're treated like kings. So we wonder why we're going to have 90,000 children crossing the border with here, throughout this year. The fiscal year is when the fiscal year ends, but it's going to be 90,000 pretty close. It was estimated to be 60. So why are they coming here? Because they're being offered things to come here that they wouldn't get anywhere else. Now it's interesting that the people that are coming to this country, they're leaving a place that's much less desirable than the United States. But yet we're always told how racist our country is. Isn't that interesting? That these people that are coming over our borders, spilling over onto our borders illegally, are coming to this racist, terrible place? This place that needs to be fundamentally transformed? Why are they coming here? They're crossing our borders because what's inside the borders is much more desirable than the place that they came that was surrounded by borders. They're coming here because we have a system that allows them to be prosperous and more free. But yet the same people that support them coming here do not appreciate this place. It's a paradox. But the thing is that what immigration policy is supposed to do, it's supposed to regulate the people that come in to make sure that they're not going to be a burden on the system that is very prosperous. And it's also supposed to bring people into the country and allow them to learn what Americanism is, to be able to assimilate to our culture. That way they do not corrupt or change our culture. It's not saying anything derogatory to the people. It's just when they're coming to the place that they see so great, they need to understand why it is great. And they need to be able to perform their duties as citizens inside of that system. They need to understand their responsibilities. They need to understand the borders. They need to understand the law within those borders, the culture within those borders. So the importance of borders is differentiating what is great and what is not so great. They're coming across the border to come into what is great. Now, if you're not appreciating what's inside of the borders and you want to change it, There's several ways you can do that. The American way is to get representatives to come into office or get voted into office through the electoral process, and to make change within the laws, and sometimes even making amendments to the Constitution to change it to where it is something that's more appealing to the people that want to change it. Coming into certain communities and deciding where you want to live, deciding what state you want to live in, reviewing the laws and saying, I like the set of laws here. They suit what's best for me and my family. So the individual that crosses the border needs to understand the civics of it. They need to understand what makes our society a civil one. So in order to destroy that, you have to make it an uncivil society. Well, how do you do that? Well, you'll allow people in that do not understand the culture. You allow people in that do not understand the language. They disrupt the system because they can't communicate to the people within that system. It's hard enough to communicate when we all speak English. It's even that much more hard to communicate when we don't even speak the same language. These aren't mean and evil racist things. These are practical, logical explanations of what we need to do with our immigration policy. The policy that exists, not a new one, not a, what do they say? We need comprehensive reform. No, we don't need comprehensive reform. We need to simply protect our borders and work within our immigration system. Assimilate people when they come here. Make sure that they are ready to be Americans. We have a standard in America. And that standard has nothing to do with skin color. It has nothing to do with where you come from. It has to do with being an American, being an individual. So there's people that are in office and people that are in different groups around the country that wish to fundamentally transform the United States. And in order to do that outside of the law, outside of the American way, by doing it the un-American way, and in a radical sense, do it in a Marxist way, you disrupt the culture. You make it uncivil. At the community level, you may be a community organizer to agitate, to divide, to balkanize. Oh, you're a black guy. Well, those white guys are taking advantage of you. So this is what you can do to get back at those guys, to take their power, the evil bourgeois. That isn't American. That's far from American. Americans unite. We talk about the cultural melting pot, which was a term used in the early 1900s. I believe it's 1900s. About cultures coming here and melting together. Well, when they're melting together to become Americans. It's throwing off the other flags and grasping the American flag. Throwing off the other cultures and grasping the American culture. Not ignoring your former culture. There's nothing wrong with recognizing your heritage and your family's heritage, but it's important to embrace American culture. Understanding that the nation of America, or United States, the reason why it's a great nation is because of our system that is protected by borders. So to tear that down, wouldn't you do something like maybe release 36,000 criminal aliens in the United States in 2013? Okay, so the people are here illegally. And not only are they here illegally, they break laws and become criminals of the American system. And then they're released. If you have done anything wrong and have been in jail and had to go through the American system in order to either prove that you've been innocent or you've been proven guilty, then these individuals that were here illegally didn't have to go through that same system. They just got released. Why did they get released into the system? Why weren't they not sent home? Why would we as a nation release criminals that do not know how to conform to the United States system? Why would we release them in our own culture? Why would we? It's suicide. Unless you're looking to use it as revolution, disruption, create chaos. When you create chaos, people reach out to find somebody that can give order to that. And that may be including sacrifice some of their rights because of their fear. So out of those 36,000 criminal aliens released in 2013, 193 of them were homicide convictions, including one willful killing of a public official with a gun, 426 sexual assault convictions, 303 kidnapping convictions, 1,075 aggravated assault convictions, 1,160 stolen vehicle convictions, 9,187 dangerous drug convictions, 16,070 drunk or drug driving convictions, and 303 flight escape convictions. Think about that. These are all people that have been convicted felons or criminals and that were released into the system. They're just roaming the United States. There's another table in here. This, by the way, is from the Center for Immigration Studies, and this is actually an ICE document, so it's a federal document that's detailed here. In Table 1, there's a criminal convictions of aliens released from ICE custody in 2013. Traffic offenses 17,000. Traffic offense driving under the influence of liquor 15,000. Dangerous drugs 91,000. I'm sorry, 9,100. And the list goes through. I mean, battery, forgery, robbery, sex offenses, kidnapping, threat, intimidation, homicide, gambling, extortion, embezzlement, arson, tax revenue crimes, smuggling, homicide, obscenity. They even have abortion on here. Total convictions, 87,000 convictions for 63 or 36,000 people. So these 36,000 people on average were convicted of 3 crimes or more. So not only do we ignore our borders, not only do we ignore the protection of the United States through assimilating individuals that come to live here into our culture, not only do we ignore the laws that these people are breaking and the punishment that they're supposed to receive, even though they're not even American citizens, we release them into the country, into our communities, the communities that we work in to try to keep civil, the families that we try to protect so we can live a happy and prosperous life in the American system. So think about that. Assimilation is the most important thing to a nation. Multiculturalism kills a nation. And like I said before, it's not about forgetting your heritage. It's understanding and adhering to the American heritage. Protecting our founding in the meaning and the purpose of our country, the Declaration of Independence. That is our why. I've heard that recently. What makes things great or brands great is the why. America had a defined why before it had a system that protected it. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is our why. That's why we exist, to pursue happiness, to protect liberty. So when we talk about our borders and protecting our borders, it has nothing to do with being racist or xenophobic. When we're called, as conservatives, we're called incompassionate or uncompassionate or mean or insensitive. When you release 36,000 criminals into the United States, into our communities, that's not compassion. That's not compassion. When Americans want to keep a society civil, that is compassion. When we understand that there are certain breaking points in our economic system, and that if we go past that threshold, we'll collapse the system, and we understand those responsibilities, and we realize the lives that we will destroy if we allow that system to collapse, and we go the extra mile to protect that, that is compassion. When we're very clear on our immigration system to prevent 90,000 children from traveling across hundreds and hundreds of miles while getting sexually abused, physically abused, mentally abused, and then putting them in FEMA camps separated by age. When we're clear about our immigration policy, that is compassion. When we do not set out a system or advertise a system that creates a dependency by foreign aliens, people that come here to try to benefit themselves, when we don't set the bait out there of some kind of dependent welfare system, and we actually support people come into this nation to do better for themselves, people that can support themselves and become Americans, that is compassion. When we support charity and we tell each other that it's good to give when we've received, that is compassion. Not making people subservient to a government or a political party in order to get freebies. That isn't compassion. I could go on for days about how compassionate conservatism is. You don't have to even say compassionate conservatism. That's redundant. Being responsible is a part of being compassionate. I'm not a burden to my society, so I'm compassionate. But when I fail and I need a little bit of help, there's compassionate individuals that are responsible there to provide compassion. When you undermine that and you simply take taxes and collect a bunch of money and put it in a coffer somewhere and you distribute that money politically, that's not compassion. So I think it's interesting just generally to educate ourselves on what we're dealing with when it comes to the border. And I got some statistics I actually got from CNN. It's titled "The Immigration Statistic Fast Facts," and I think it just kind of adds a little bit of color to the people that are coming here. In 2013, the legal immigration statistics show that there was 990,000 people granted lawful permanent residence in the United States. So almost 1 million people were granted residence in 2013. Approximately 40% of those were green card recipients, or LPRs, were born in Asia, while about 32% were born in North America. So 1 million people entered the country legally. 1 million people. It's a lot of people. So out of the legal immigrants that came here, 14% were Mexican, 7.2% were Chinese, almost 7% were Indian, 5.5% were Filipino, and 4.2% were from the Dominican Republic, which that's pretty interesting, that a large majority of the people were from Dominican Republic. The top U.S. states that received legal permanent residence were California, 19.4%, New York, 13.5%, Florida, 10.4%, Texas, 9.4%, and New Jersey, 5.4%. So let's see, a total of 779,000 people entered or became naturalized United States citizens, and the top countries were Mexico, 12.7%, India, 6.4%, Philippines, 5.6%, Dominican Republic, 5.1%. So here's the illegal immigration statistics. And this is 2012. The Department of Homeland Security estimates that there are 11.4 million unauthorized immigrants living in the United States, down from 11.5 million in 2011. Gee, I wonder why some of them left. Self-deported, the bad word, you know. Possibly poor economy, maybe. Must be Bush's fault. So out of the illegals, 59% of them from Mexico, 6% are from El Salvador, 5% were from Guatemala, 3% from Honduras, and believe it or not, 3% were from the Philippines. The top United States, the top U.S. states that were that had unauthorized immigrants: California, 25%, Texas, 16%, Florida, 6%, New York, 5%, and Illinois, 5%. What's interesting to me is, like, Texas, first of all, is a state that is, if the conservatives or it becomes a blue state, Texas, it's over. You can forget about ever having another Republican or conservative president. And Florida has always been a pretty big swing state. So those two states are in there. Unauthorized immigrants to the United States tend to be young, 61% between the ages of 25 and 44. And male, 53%. However, 57% of unauthorized immigrants over the age of 45 are female. And remember, there's laws in the books that if the females come here and they have babies, those children become citizens at birth. So in 2012, 419,384 unauthorized immigrants are removed from the United States. Approximately 40% of these individuals have prior criminal convictions. So they've been sent 73% to Mexico, 9% to Guatemala, 7% to Honduras, and 4% to El Salvador. So unaccompanied alien children in 2014, the estimate was 60,000. This was, when was this dated? This was dated in July. No, it was updated in 2014. I've heard 90,000. I've heard that through the media. In 2013, it was 24,000. In 2012, it was 14,000. That is a huge escalation. And why? Just look to Congress. That's all they're talking about is immigration. Immigration this, how we have to give amnesty, or how we have to make way for the dreamers. Well, they're setting out the chum. They're bringing the people in. They're hearing, oh, if we get to the United States, we can become citizens. Top countries of origin for these children. Now, this is interesting. 37% of them are from Guatemala. 30% are from Honduras. 26% are from El Salvador. 3% are from Mexico, and 2% from Ecuador. About 73% of them are boys, and about 76% are between 14 and 18 years of age. Can you imagine sending your 14-year-old over 100 miles or several hundred miles without having any parents, turning them over to drug dealers? So this idea that it's compassionate to allow this to happen is absolutely absurd. It's the complete epitome of it's borderline evil. When you understand the conditions that these children are traveling in, I mean, there's scorpions, snakes. They're having to deal with drug cartels. A lot of them they're coming with a bunch of money to cross the Rio Grande. They're given, I think it's like $6,000 to cross the Rio Grande, and they're dealing with the drug lords. And these kids, some of these kids are getting raped or molested. I mean, it's absolutely absurd what's going on. And what's going to happen if we allow these individuals to come and see the United States and not be assimilated to our culture? They're going to fundamentally transform it. When they don't understand the importance of our borders, and I'm talking about our individual borders, they don't understand the responsibilities we have as citizens in protecting our rights and understanding the Constitution, understanding why the Constitution is a charter of negative liberties. When they don't understand that, and they have a politician up there pandering to them saying, hey, we can get you jobs, we can create this great governmental program, that way if you get sick you get free health care, we can do all these great things for you. And they don't understand the fact that the government is not supposed to do that. It is not the way it was designed. It is not that is what made the country the great country that it is. It is not what made the country that great to coerce you to come here. You came to this system because it's a great system. You came to this country because it's a great country. But yet the people that are luring you here are trying to destroy it and make it like the place that you came from. How is it compassionate to not let them know this? How is it compassionate for the crying, whiny John Boehner to go to the Chamber of Commerce and say, and I'm just going to guess this because they get so much money from the Chamber of Commerce, it's hard to not believe they go, hey, we can get you really cheap labor. How is that compassionate? Compassion is, hey, Mr. and Mrs. America, we're going to protect our borders. That way you can maintain your wages. But instead, people like John Boehner, people like Andy McCarthy, people like, well, you know the whole slew of them up there in the Republican Party. They're not compassionate. They're bringing people here to take our jobs because the Chamber of Commerce, who gives them tons of money, is going to fund them, their coffers, keep them in power. Crony capitalism. And then what happens when the crony capitalists come and lower wages because they have now a much larger pool of people to pick from to do their labor, to do their work? What happens to the income gap, the so-called inequality in our system? Do you not think that's going to create more inequality? Well, the Republicans don't give a crap about that. The left is either one, they're stupid, don't realize that it's going to happen, or two, they realize it's going to happen, so that way they can create a huge income gap, and then they can community organize to the people that are low-wage income owners that become the new proletariat in the Marxist struggle. This is pretty much all common sense. And the lines get blurred. The borders of the argument get blurred when you start looking to the outliers. When you start hearing people being called xenophobes and racist, all that is to distort the discussion. The discussion is America the place we want to be? Is America the land? Is it the place we want to maintain? If we want to maintain America the way it is, we have to regulate our borders. Not put up huge walls and not let anybody in. We have to regulate them. That may include walls that allow a certain amount of people to come in, but we have to make sure the people coming in are understanding what their responsibilities are. And if you're someone that wants to fundamentally transform the country outside of the Constitution, you create havoc, chaos, and lawlessness by not obeying the laws, by allowing people to not obey the laws, or not enforcing the laws, or as an executive making up your own laws, which is outside the separation of powers in the Constitution. So there's a lot to digest here, and the borders are very important. And whenever I hear libertarians talk about tearing down borders or having these porous borders and allowing people to freely come through the United States, they don't understand borders, because much like Marxists, they're looking at things in material ways. I agree with most of what the libertarians stand for, but I don't believe in what they say about our borders. Our borders are there for a reason. It's to protect our culture, and that culture is Americanism. We have to be able to protect the American idea. We have to protect the Constitution. The Declaration is our purpose. We have to protect all these things. And when we protect them, we can hand down this to our progeny. We can hand down this great country to our children and grandchildren, and to immigrants that want to come here and be prosperous as they work within our system legally. That is compassionate. And as we do that, we will spread that prosperity around the world, because we are a beacon of light. People look to America as the example. Reagan talked about the shiny city on the hill. We are the beacon of liberty. We are the example. And as we blur our borders individually, in our family, we destroy life indiscriminately because we don't want to have a family, or we don't understand the responsibility of having a family. If you want to look at this in a religious or a faithful way, in the way that churches protect this, is that we don't cheat on our husbands and wives because we're destroying the boundaries of our family. We're destroying the boundaries of our child, distorting their view on what a nuclear family is all about, and the best way to perpetuate life, liberty, and happiness. That's compassionate. And it's unfortunate that some people aren't able to experience that. They go through hardships. But in order to perpetuate that, we have to protect that culture. We have to protect the family, the community, the state, and lastly, our nation. So I want to thank you for joining me today. Be sure to visit lanternsofliberty.us, thebattlefieldofideas.com. Also, you can find us on Facebook under Lanterns of Liberty. Join our forum. You can actually Facebook me a message, and I'll get you into our forum, and you can get on the battlefield of ideas and discuss these type of topics. And we want to hear from everybody. If you're a socialist, a liberal, a progressive, whatever you call yourself, libertarian, conservative, we want to hear from you and hear your ideas. And we can discuss and debate. So thank you for joining me. We'll be back from the battlefield of ideas.
If it becomes wayward, who shall control it? If it becomes unjust, who shall trust it? As sentinels of the country's watchtower, I beseech you to watch and guard with sleepless dread that corporation which can make all property and rights, all states and people, and all liberty and hope its playthings in an hour and its victims forever.